Well, hello there, and welcome back to the very latest episode of my Love Machine podcast. Now, today I'm going to be talking to you about the horrible subject of jealousy. Now, do you have feelings of extreme jealousy, feelings of low self-worth, and you really want to build your confidence to overcome this? Are these things holding you back in your relationship, in previous relationships, and stopping you from moving forwards? Well, my guest today has overcome these issues, and she now teaches people how to do exactly the same thing. Now, Shannen Bryant is a corporate trainer, a certified life coach, and a podcast host of Jealousy Junkie, helping her clients regain their self-worth, gain confidence, and overcome extreme jealousy. Shannen, how are you doing?
I'm doing well, thank you.
I'm really pleased to have you here. We spoke briefly off podcast the other day. We had a great chat, and I'm really excited to hear all about your strategies to overcome jealousy. It's such a huge issue in relationships, probably more so than ever. So just to start, can you tell everyone your own story and what issues you experienced?
Sure. Well, yeah, if anyone would have told me 8 years ago that I would be helping other people overcome jealousy, I would have said, there's just no way. One, I just thought that that's just how I am, how I'm always going to be. It's just how I'm wired. And two, I really thought I was the only one that experienced this. And I think a lot of people feel that way, that they're the only ones that struggle with this in relationships. So, coming for full circle and going through taking care of those action habits and those thinking habits that I was so prone to, and being on the other side of it now, helping other people.
Fantastic. So when you're experiencing this sort of thing yourself, how much of it do you think was justified of this jealousy, and how much was in your own head? Because I think often people sabotage and they expect the worst, and they're used to being treated badly, and therefore they do experience jealousy. That's what they're used to. So in your situation, how much of it was just what you expected, and how much was justified?
Probably 90% of it was just in my head. That's what I'm thinking. I'm thinking that they're going to do this thing, or I'm thinking that this is going to happen. I'm waiting for the other shoe to fall, and being afraid of abandonment and losing that relationship. And so 90% of it was just in my head. But man, it sure seemed like that was really happening in reality.
It does, doesn't it? Any sort of issue does play on your expectations, your anxiety, and it makes things a lot worse. And it depends on how you were probably raised and how you treated this and how you dealt with it as a child. But I'll let you explain that. What are the causes, the deep rooted issues for all this?
Yeah. Well, you nailed it. I mean, most of this comes from the way we were raised, how our childhood was, and kind of what attachment styles that we formed in childhood. And then it can be a situation where, maybe you were a very secure person and you got into a situation where there was some infidelity in your relationship, or maybe a series of relationships with infidelity. That can certainly cause it as well. But it's usually pretty deep rooted from our childhood. And for me, that's where it came from. I'm an adult child of an alcoholic. So my father was an alcoholic. And so growing up was very violent and chaotic. And then, my father and I didn't talk from the time I was 12 until I was about 25. So I definitely had that feeling of abandonment, and certainly that feeling of, well, if my own father doesn't love me and doesn't want to be with me and, have a relationship with me, why would anyone else?
That's awful, but surprisingly common, I've become
Yeah.
to realize. I'm very lucky. I had great parents who looked after us, but nobody's perfect, of course. But I see this a lot with my clients, and it leads to all different forms of jealousy. It can lead to people being jealous of other people who are in happy relationships. It can be jealous of your partner's success, just downright thinking your partner's going to cheat on you every 2 seconds. What were the most common ones that you experienced, and what are the most common ones your clients experience now?
Yeah, it's certainly the latter. So being nervous that they're interested in someone else, they're going to leave you for someone else. And that's typically what the experience is, where there's no evidence of infidelity or cheating, but we have this in our mind, and it can really stifle the relationship. I mean, I know for me, in my relationship with my now husband, that I mean, we stopped going to dinners and movies and events. And I mean, it was just completely crippling the relationship.
Why did you stop doing that? Because you had so much jealousy. You thought he was talking to other women. It was
Yeah, just looking at other women, felt like he was, checking other women out when we were out at dinner. And I mean, it was to the point where when we would go to dinner to a restaurant, and this, I mean, it gets to the point where it's this bad for a lot of people, where I've already scoped out the room, before we've even put in our names with the hostess. I've scoped out the room. I know where all the potential threats are. And as you talked about before, now I have that in my mind. I think that that's who he's going to look at or check out or want to talk to or any of those things. And so the minute he looks in that direction, well, there it is. There's my proof. There's my evidence. He did exactly what I thought he would do. And really, I mean, he may have just been looking to see where the restrooms were or a painting on the wall. But in my mind, that's what was happening.
Hence the extreme jealousy that's going on. I think it's normal to some degree to be looking around and thinking, to appreciate other people. Oh, they're attractive, they're tall, remind me of a celebrity. That's just normal behavior. But it's how the partner acts on it. That's the issue. Do you think it's normal for someone to look around a little bit? Not to think, oh, I want to go and approach them, but just to appreciate that. What do you think?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, that's the part where it gets difficult, because even for us and in relationships where this is happening, then it starts to change your partner's behaviors. Now they don't want to look around. They don't feel comfortable to just look up from their salad and enjoy, whatever the scenery is, whether you're having dinner at a nice restaurant on a lake or whatever the situation is, they don't feel like they can then move freely about and just be a normal person. So yes, it's absolutely, that's pretty normal for someone to be able to look around the room when they're at dinner. But because we're so focused on that happening and what they're doing, the minute they do it, we feel like that's a sign that they're interested in someone else. And it's really about, okay, then what does that mean to me? Right? Because it's normal when we see beautiful things or attractive things, we're human. We love to look at beautiful things. So it was more about, well, then what does that mean to me? And how am I interpreting that?
Do you think this can push your partner away and end up with them doing things and being blamed for it anyway? Might as well go and do it.
I mean, that is a lot of times what's said in the relationship. I feel like if someone's not going to do it, they're not going to do it, whether you have this issue or not. If they're going to do it, they're going to do it. But it's certainly something that they will say because they're tired of being accused of things that they're not doing, or, being accused of me feeling like in the future they're going to do those things. And so again, it's a part of them also changing their behavior, and it can be very frustrating. Should my husband have stayed with me through that? I don't know. I mean, probably not, thank goodness he did, but it does take a serious toll on your relationship.
Of course it does. Well, that's a great sign that he did that. He must have been really attracted to you and wanted to make this work with you. So that's a good sign for both of you. That's very positive. But how much work do you both need to do on this in this situation?
Yeah. Well, the majority of it lies within the jealous person. Certainly there are things that if you have a good partner, a good secure partner, that they can help and kind of reassure along the way. But I will say, for that person, I mean, in most situations, there wasn't anything that he could say or do in the moment to convince me that that didn't happen, or that wasn't his thought, or that he wasn't going to do it. So it's pretty difficult for them to get you through it. It's more about them reassuring you, about the relationship. But in the moment, there's not a lot that they're going to be able to say. So a lot of that falls on the work of the jealous person.
Okay. So this is what you teach people now in the same situation. So if someone comes to you and they're experiencing this, what are the first things that you do to work with them on?
Hmm. So, our thinking leads to our actions and our behaviors. But in this sense, I like to really start, you kind of have to work from both sides of it, and what I call the action habits and then the thinking habits. The action habits are things that we get into, looking through their phone, their social media, their emails, tracking them. I mean, all of this. And I say, I wish I would have been paid for it during the time, because I feel like it was a part-time job for me, doing all those things. But we get into those habits. The little comments that we make, when your partner's just sharing how their day went, what I'm focused on are the details of, is he going to say anything that he didn't tell me before? Does that match up with this? But a lot of our kind of action habits of making a snarky comment like, oh, well, that, if you don't remember something that they told you, and we say, oh, that must have been your other girlfriend, or that must have been your other wife. It's those types of things that we're saying and doing that we really want to start with, because if you can take down some of those action habits and stop them, even just that little bit, relieve some of the tension in the jealous junkie, because, questions breed more questions, right? So if I'm looking through their email, I'm going to go down that rabbit hole of like, well, why, or their text messages. Well, why'd they use a smiley face there? Like, what did that mean? Or I don't see the other part of the conversation. Why is it missing? So all of these things just breed more questions. So we start with the action habits and really working through them first, and then starting to get to those thinking habits that are usually a little bit more difficult.
When you were doing this and going through your partner's emails and text messages and things, does that mean that he purposely left his phone available for you to look at? Or does that become something that you've now agreed?
It's just, if he were, on the nightstand, he wasn't hiding his phone, but there would be times, it gets to the point where, oh, he flipped it over this time. Why is it face down on the couch this time instead of face up, or whatever the situation is? But in my particular case, he wasn't hiding his phone. He wasn't, keeping it right next to him. He wasn't shutting it off, any of those things. But again, we can find things in anything when we are in that mindset.
You're looking for patterns, aren't you? Looking for evidence that something's not right. And it happens all the time. People are calling red flags on relationships when they're not. They're just someone being busy or somebody being ill, anything like that at all. But of course, there are times when people are not interested and they're purposely avoiding you. And people are doing things to cheat on you. This is reality. It's dealing with it and realizing that if you're in a strong, comfortable relationship with a partner and you support each other, these things don't come into your mind. But when you have the doubts based on how you're being treated in the past, it's just normal to be like this, isn't it? I say normal. It's normal to initially have this, but then you need to be able to work on it and resolve it. And that's where you come in, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. And in that case, it's really working off of, is this fear or intuition, right? Because we know, yes, infidelity happens in relationships, unfortunately, all the time. And especially if you're prone to it, if you've had previous relationships where a partner has cheated on you, yes, you are, if we don't deal with it, we're probably going to take it into the next relationship. And so then it's really, is this intuition? Like I have this intuition that something actually is going on, or is it my fear because of my past?
It's so true. I was going to say this a minute ago, but it's a bit of a cliche, but they say that fear is false evidence appearing real, don't they? Which is pretty much what this is exactly in this situation. Yeah. And that defines it. But I didn't want to say that. It's a bit of a cliche, but it is true. It summarizes it perfectly, doesn't it? Here.
Yes, it sure does.
It does. But of course, real evidence can also appeal real as well. So that's the difference. They don't talk about rear, do they? So it doesn't matter. But in this situation, I think most people do imagine things are happening when they're not, which I'm just imagining, did your partner not have a lock screen on his phone? Or was that part of the condition you had with him? Because my phone, I have a PIN number on it. I'm not hiding anything, but if someone steals my phone, I don't want them going through it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's where, I need to know all of the passwords for everything. And so I knew those things, and we do that too. And, sometimes you go into relationships where, yes, maybe that information, sharing that information is important if something happens, if there's an emergency situation. But most of the time, we're asking for those things because of other reasons, because of our fear and wanting to have access to those things. So I knew all of that. I know, his passwords to everything. And so that's how I was able to get into all of those things, track his location, all of that. I was able to do. So
track his location. I'm smiling now at the thought of this, but it's a very serious matter at the time. Of course it is. It is. I can imagine that. Do you think everyone experiences this to some degree at some point in their life?
Well, jealousy in itself is a very natural thing. I mean, we are all going to feel a little bit of jealousy from time to time or in a certain situation. For most people, it's a fleeting thought. It's a fleeting moment and a feeling, and it goes away, and there's nothing, they don't take it any further. It's when that becomes then you start to have negative behaviors that it becomes a problem. And certainly in this situation where the jealousy has become extreme, those behaviors are coming out, whether it's a meltdown, in a restaurant, or certainly leads to arguments in most cases.
Of course it would do, because they wouldn't understand what's going on and why you're getting angry, and it becomes defensive, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So when people go through this and they're starting to learn how to deal with it and handle this situation, what can they do when they're really experiencing this in their head and they want to have it, they want to explode, or they want to really get this out into the open, but they don't want to tell their partner what's going on because it might cause more arguments. So how can you release all this? What do you recommend?
So if they're not having a conversation with their partner, and let me just say, your partner knows if you have this extreme jealousy, there's no reason to not talk about it with them because they already know. And not talking about it isn't going to help the situation. But if you're in that situation, you haven't discussed it, and you're starting to feel that extreme jealousy, one of the things, and it's simple and we hear it, but it certainly works, is removing yourself from the situation, just giving yourself a minute, whether it's to go to the restroom, take a quick walk, will make a little bit of a difference on how you handle it. Because there is, you're either going to react, you can react, or you can respond. And so just taking a minute often lets us to where we can respond versus react. And, we talked about it leading to arguments, but if I'm just out and out, have a meltdown and start accusing them at the table, that's not going to go over as well as if I take a minute, I kind of calm down, remove myself from the situation, and then come back and respond with, I'm feeling this way. I'm telling myself that you were looking at that person. So again, kind of the accountability being on you, because 99% of the time in these situations, it's you thinking and having these thoughts. So coming to that person and saying, I'm telling myself that you did this, or I'm telling myself, or I'm feeling insecure in this moment, is definitely a different conversation than, I know that you looked at her, and I know that you want to sleep with her, and I know that you're going to try to get her, all of those things. It's definitely a different conversation.
Of course it is. Do it in a rational way, of course. That's the way to do it.
Yeah.
How much of this is down to self-confidence? And how much can you fix with that?
Yeah. So a lot of it is sort of that self-confidence. And again, kind of going back to what is the root of jealousy, because jealousy is actually a symptom or a solution to a problem, right? We hear people say all the time, my problem is I'm so jealous, or the problem in the relationship is how jealous I am. The problem isn't jealousy. That's actually what you're putting out there as a solution to something. So what is it that you are using this jealousy for? Is it projection? Is it protection? There are different things that you can be using that jealousy for. So it's really getting to the root of it. And again, a lot of times that goes back to the childhood, or even if you were in a relationship where there was infidelity and you were fine before that, or maybe you had a series of it, it's super important as you are starting to date someone new, or even when you're single, of going through and figuring out, what did that what did that mean to me? So what did that affair, that infidelity mean to me? And how am I interpreting it on myself? Because often if someone cheats on you, you internalize that. Like, what did I do wrong? Why would they do that to me? Why was I not good enough? And so if you go into the next relationship with those types of thoughts and feelings, that jealousy is going to rear its head.
It is, but that's easier said than done not to do it, isn't it? Because it's
Yeah.
normal to do it. So you must have had these concerns before you met your husband, when you first started dating him, in previous relationships. So what was it about him that he was the one that decided you're going to work together and sort this out? What did you do? What was different?
It was really about me, in terms of you're right. In every relationship, as long as I can remember, I had this jealousy. And so, when I was in relationships with good guys and bad guys, either one, but the jealousy was still there. Did it show up more extreme in some situations? Yes. So it's almost like the more I was invested in someone, or the more feelings I had for them, the stronger that jealousy would be, because there's a higher sense of fear that I'm going to lose them. So in this situation, it was almost like, unfortunately for him, I really kind of knew that he was a pretty special person. And so it really, reared its ugly head pretty quickly.
So it makes it worse.
It really does. But it just got to the point, because of that, because I knew this is someone that I really, I see a future with, but also I was just so sick of myself, to be honest, like so tired of not being able to enjoy life, not even being able to go and have a nice dinner, those types of things, that I knew, like, I have to tackle this once and for all. Like, I have to get to the root of this and figure it out, because I'm going to lose this relationship, and it's going to just follow me into my future relationships.
So did you do this on your own? Did you do it for a coach or from a therapist, or together?
Yeah. So I've been to a therapist a few times, and I will tell you one turning point. My husband and I actually got kicked out of therapy. I like to joke about, like, on Bridesmaids, where they invite her to not live with them anymore. It was sort of that, where, I invite you to not come back. But it was really because I went into that situation going, just tell me what to do and I'll do it. Like, whatever it is, just tell me what to do. Instead of really kind of going through the things that I was supposed to do, and the actions that I was supposed to take, and thinking through things. It was just like, well, tell me what to do and I'll do it. And so we would have the same argument. We'd have the initial argument, and then we'd argue again in therapy, and then we'd argue after therapy about the new stuff that came up. But I did go to therapy. But one of the things that happened with my last session is the therapist handed me what's called the ACA laundry list. And so it's 14 characteristics of an adult child of an alcoholic. And when I saw that, I thought, oh, well, I didn't know this existed. And when I went through it, it was like, check, 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 check. Yes, that's me. That's me. That's me. And I think for me, when I saw that, okay, if there's something on paper, that means there's a solution, and I must not be the only one. Now, adult children of alcoholics, they don't all grow up and be this extreme jealous person in their relationship, but it's one of the things that can happen. And certainly in my case, so I was able to start connecting the dots. And then a lot of it was, more therapy and work on my own, of just kind of looking into it and, okay, this is what this means. And this is how I'm thinking and behaving in these situations.
Right. Okay. Interesting. So you also mentioned that you didn't talk to your dad for a long time. Yeah. Can I ask how you reconnected and what made you want to do that?
So my family, mostly my mom, pushed me for a long time. Like, you should have a relationship with your dad. You really, you're going to regret it. Yeah. And I thought for many years, like, no, I'm not, because I've already, I learned how to drive a car, and I've been dating, and, went through all these milestones in my life that he wasn't there for. But when I started to kind of really understand that, wait a second, it is causing me issues, because for the longest time I thought, and I'm not affected by it. I don't care. It doesn't bother me. Well, that certainly isn't true, or wasn't true. So it was a very slow process. And, I really wanted an apology from him. I wanted him to understand like what he did and how it affected my life and all of those things. And I wasn't going to get that. The conversations were very rough in the beginning because I was trying to force that out of him. And that just wasn't going to happen. So I thought, okay, I have to figure out how to do this without the apology. Like I can still heal from this without his apology. And so
so you wanted the closure, but it was a different way, wasn't it? Yeah. I wanted the normal closure that you think of. Like he's going to apologize and it's going to make everything okay, and then move on. But he didn't apologize.
No, he didn't for a long time. He didn't.
He did eventually. He did eventually,
but it was through building that relationship and me not forcing those things.
Rebuilding the trust on both sides, probably. Because I imagine he must have been quite hurt, even for his own reasons, that you didn't want to talk to him. So you both did that. Is he still around now, your dad, can I ask?
He is, yes.
Okay.
And we are...
Yeah, you are one, sorry.
Yeah, and we are still building. This is only, so this past Father's Day is only the second Father's Day that we've spent together, like getting to the point where we're actually having breakfast together and having conversations. It was a very slow build, but yes.
No, I was wondering if he attended your wedding or not.
No, he did not.
Okay.
We weren't at that point yet. No. And like you said, I mean, there are a lot of things on his end, certainly me pushing that and reminding him of how bad my life was because of things he did. Yeah. An alcoholic, that's a disease for them. And so he had guilty feelings of his own that then I was bringing to light. And no one really wants that,
Well, no. But that'd be a nice happy ending if he did come and it was all nice. But that's not how the world works, is it? It takes a long time to go through this. But the fact that all three of you are willing to work through this is a great testament to you. And that's amazing. What advice would you give someone now that is experiencing this in the early stages of dating, where they realize that every time they're going out, they're getting even maybe online dating and on dating apps, and they're thinking, oh no, there's no point interacting with this person. They must get thousands of people liking them. They're never going to like me, and they get the doubts. What would you tell them? What would your new version of you tell them?
Yeah. Well, I would say to start with that, whatever story that it is that they're telling themselves, because we know that a lot of us run on that loop where we have this made up, unreal story that we tell ourselves. And so it's digging through, what am I actually saying to myself? Because oftentimes we don't know what those things are and we're not paying attention to them, but yet we're constantly saying them in our mind. And just like, my story that I told myself for years, I'm unlovable. Why would anybody love or care for me? My own dad doesn't. Not true. He didn't not love me and he didn't not care about me. We just had a hard relationship. So I would say start there in what are the things that I'm telling myself that I'm not good enough for this person? Or why do I think I'm not good enough for this person? And really starting again, kind of getting to the root of why I have those things.
You're so right. We tell ourselves utter nonsense every day, don't we? We tell ourselves all these things. I'm not good enough. No one's going to want that. What is the point in even trying? I can do that, but it'll take me so long and they're never going to achieve what I want. But when we start to take action on anything, we always get towards it. But I think even as coaches, we still, I'm speaking for myself here, really. I think, I still make excuses and still sometimes doubt myself. And it takes someone else to come along and say, why are you telling yourself such rubbish? Would you agree with that?
Oh, 100%. I mean, yeah, it sometimes takes someone else to really pull that out and go, do you realize what you just said? Or do you realize that you're kind of having that same loop of that conversation in your mind? Because a lot of times it's hard to see that.
It is. I had a coffee with someone the other day. I did a podcast with her a couple of years ago. It's the first time I met her. Great meeting. And I thought, is she really going to want to speak with me, have time speaking to me? She's very busy. And she said utterly lovely things to me about her first impressions of me. And I've really helped her in several ways by even having initial conversations. You don't realize the impact you make on people.
Yeah.
Because they don't always tell you. Because that's the interesting thing. And dating's the same as that, isn't it? If you go on a date, you might not be the one, but you might leave them with a great memory or boost their confidence. And that's what life is all about. I think making other people feel happy, but not at your own expense.
Yeah.
Really.
Well, yeah. And it's interesting how we can determine what somebody else is thinking and feeling and going to do, right? Even just in an app, like, oh, I know that, I've got their number. I know what they're going to do. It's like, we don't know anything about that person, or we don't know much about them. And we're kind of going into it with those preconceived notions of what's going to happen.
That's so true. The amount of people look at people's profiles, particularly on these apps, and say, well, he's this sort of person, or I can tell he's a player, he's got his top off, or he doesn't smile, therefore he must be really miserable. It's just not really how it works. Over a repeated period of time, you can get used to this and you can make better judgments. But if you're new to it, you've got to be open-minded and do all these things. And don't assume people won't be interested or assume people are going to be cheating on you. I think at least at the early stage of dating, people are multi-dating anyway. I actually encourage that they do see multiple people, not to sleep with them all, just to see what's out there. So at that particular moment, they're not your priority and you won't be theirs. But over time, you will be. And that's what trust happens. And when you have a happy relationship, then hopefully these feelings go away. But do these feelings of jealousy ever completely go away? Are they always in the back of your mind? Because you're a junkie. So sorry, junkie, it's gonna carry on, isn't it?
Yeah, I think and I sometimes I hate to talk about it. It's always kind of there because I don't want to deter people from like, oh, see, I'm never going to be better. But what is different is the trigger for it has to be much, much greater for me at this point than it was before. And it truly feels like a different life. We're going to dinner, we're watching movies, we can go and just be a happy couple. And it's not always the forefront of my mind. So what could have triggered me could have been just him glancing in one direction. That could have been a major trigger and ruin the evening. Whereas now it would need to be a much, much bigger trigger for me.
I love that. That makes perfect sense. For anyone that's listening, I haven't just insulted Shannen by calling her a junkie. That's the name of her brand and her website. For those who haven't remembered, calling her a junkie isn't it? Like, over here in the UK, calling someone a junkie isn't a very nice thing. But
well, it's kind of the same here. But I say junkie because when you have that extreme jealousy, it's similar to that where we get in these sort of obsessive kind of addictive behaviors. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
No, it's a great name. I'm just pointing out for those who've just skipped a bit of this podcast and realised why I'm calling my guest a junkie, just to make sure. I'll look at the peaks of the podcast. Hang on a minute, what's going on? He just insulted her, which I never want to do, of course. But that's great. Which is actually a great way now to wrap up, actually, because that's a wonderful conversation. Thank you so much for sharing your story, Shannen. That's wonderful. If somebody wants to find out more about you and your Jealousy You Junkie podcast, how do they do that?
Yeah. Well, they can find me at jealousyjunkie.com. I'm also on Instagram at Jealousy Junkie Coach. So either way.
Fantastic. And I'm going to be speaking on your podcast very shortly as well.
Yes.
So I'm very much looking to speaking to you again in a few days' time and hearing my thoughts on that as well. So that'll be great. Great conversation. Thank you, Shannen. Have a great rest of the day.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for listening. I'd love to give you a free copy of my latest book, which you can download right now from my website, jamespreece.com. If you enjoyed this podcast, I'd really appreciate it if you could share the love by taking a few seconds to write a positive review on the iTunes store right now. See you next time.